Welcome to UK Business Show, UK's premier business show where we feature business thought leaders, high achievers, and industry experts. Today's episode is brought to you by World Outsourcing Solutions Limited, a company that specializes in helping executive business owners with virtual assistant services and business growth systems. Here's your host, Yukai Kechidori.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for joining us here today. As always, I'm delighted to bring you one of the best when it comes to the topic we're going to be talking about, which is really talking about how to think, how to write, how to present, and how to sell more effectively for executive. And my guest is a dear friend all the way from New York, Jim Rowe. Has been doing this for the last 45 years. And you can tell that the man knows what he's doing because of the outstanding testimonies that you can find on his website that he is doing. Jim, thank you so much for joining us here on the show for the first time.
Yukai, it's a real pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You know, I don't know why we haven't had you for so long, but I'm delighted you're here now.
Great, thank you.
Incredible. Jim, you talk about a structure when it comes to thinking, writing, presenting, and even sell more effectively for executive. Before we start talking about who you are and what you do, can you just share maybe something that people say, oh, I got that right from get going?
Yes, I think that thinking and writing are the two most important skills you need, regardless of what field you're in. And I think too many people take it for granted that, yes, I know how to do that, but they really haven't been trained to do it effectively.
Isn't that interesting? You know, you and I know a lot of people say, I play golf, and people often take it for granted, but the results shows for themselves. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's true. You know, Tiger Woods and I both play golf. He's quite a bit better than I am, and I can be awful or I can be just okay. But the thing that I've always been amazed at with all of these pro golfers is that they are working on their game day in, day out, all day long, all the little twists and turns and all the little nuances of the game, and they hire coaches to do it. So if those guys want to be the best at that, why do we think we can just, because we are able to speak and think and write, why do we think we're good at it? Are we doing it the right way? And I think too many people do take it for granted, and that's why I focus on it.
Indeed. I love that we have you today to really focus on that. For business owners, I know, Bill, you're listening today. You know, one of the things you can learn is what we're going to be talking about. And when you learn how to do this effectively, your organization will take a different turn. In fact, you begin to get better results. You will begin to actually serve more people. And that's why I'm excited about today's conversation, because we are all about making an impact, really contributing at a greater level into our community. Jim, for those who are yet to know you and who would love to know your background, what you've done, please give us a snapshot of your journey, particularly in what we are about to talk about.
Great, be glad to. First of all, I graduated from Fairfield University in Connecticut with a BS in marketing, and so I've been doing it most of my life. And what I found is that when I got into, I've started out in market research, then I worked in brand management, eventually became the brand manager of Coca-Cola down in Atlanta, came back to New York, was a VP of marketing and wine and spirit business. And one of my major brands was Cutty Sark, which a lot of you may be familiar with. And then went over to Saatchi's Howard Marlboro and Intermark divisions, became president of those two small divisions. And then in 1990, two of the guys who worked with me and I started Manhattan Marketing Ensemble. And I worked there for 27 years. And after 27 years, said, okay, I'm done, and retired, and then ended up getting bored, as I indicated to you at one point, and starting Jim Rowe Marketing back in 2018. I lasted about 18 months retired. It's not as all cracked up to be. And I focus, it's actually more fun. I get to focus on a client or two here or there at my pace. And then as you know, I've been writing these books. So I do marketing, and as part of marketing, we are always, my fundamental foundational phrase is to write is to think. We are always writing, we are always thinking, and we're always communicating to make sure that what we're doing is effective.
Indeed, so, and you've had some tremendous results that you've created for people. Would you share maybe one thing that even to this day you think, oh my gosh, those were outstanding results?
Yeah, it's funny. Each one of them is so special to me. We've I guess the big part of what I do is rebranding. So, I mean, I have hotels in New York City that were called one thing that are now, called Affinia Hotels that I help rebrand, or taking a pasta sauce that was a very good sauce but was a very low price point and totally rebranding it. So, they went up almost 50% in price point by doing the right kind of branding, and being able to be so much better at, let's say, the taste and fewer ingredients than Ragu and all the big brands, but they come out and they've, now they're priced properly, and that is my passion, is taking a brand, turning it around, and watching it flourish. Even little companies, I worked with when I first started Jim Rowe Marketing, I had this little organic eatery of two women who started it kind of for fun, and now they've got 9 locations. And I wrote all the copy and repositioned them. Instead of a little mom and pop, it's a brand now.
Indeed, love that. Well, clearly you've been doing this for a time, and you've got the goods to show for it. I'm keen on actually beginning the conversation on the 10-step structure. You've proven this, and I know some of your students are using this day in, day out. For those who wants to do it right, what is the very first step they ought to focus on?
Well, in the book I wrote, it's basically taking a basic marketing discipline that Procter & Gamble and a lot of companies use and break it down into 10 steps and try and get it down to 1 page. So you always start with, who are you talking to? What's your audience? And so who's your audience? And what is the purpose of this meeting, call, paper, document, whatever? What are you trying to accomplish? And so if you don't know that, you can't even start, whether you're talking to a senior executive or an employee group, or whether you're talking to a client. You need to know who you're talking to and what you want to accomplish before you go in. Then with that, you need to go, okay, what's the background? What's the situation of the business? What's the situation of the people in the room or the people that are going to be reading this? Understand who they are, what their biases may or may not be. Do they have, when I go into a client, do they have any research on their brand? Do they know anything about their competition? You need to make sure you get all that background. And that really becomes part of the analysis process. So you go through that whole thing. Now, once you lay all those things out, maybe you do a SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. Once you do that, then it's time to say, okay, all right, here's the business. What are the issues? And sometimes the clients know those issues, sometimes they don't. But the purpose of all that analysis is to outline those problems. So now you've understood the business. Now you know what the problems are. What's the objective? So many times I used to go to meetings and I'm listening to people talk. I said, what do we want to accomplish? So you need to sit down and say, okay, now that I got this is the problem. What do we want to do? Do we want to just stop sales? Do we want to expand the category? What do we want to do? Stop the sales decline or something. So let's set our objectives and make sure they're metric based, not just grow awareness. No, I want to increase share by 2.5% in the Northeast United States, and by doubling distribution, whatever. So that's the objective. And then comes the hard part, Yukai.
Before we go to the hard part, there's something I want to point out, because this has happened to me as well, and I think our listeners would need to see that this whole idea of knowing who you're talking to ought to be a priority, and you ought to revisit that over and over again. It's not something that you do once and then review 5 years later. The rate at which businesses are changing and things are evolving, you want to know exactly who is the direct consumer of your product and who are you trying to target. And I absolutely love that. And by doing this on a regular basis, here's what I've discovered. The team gets to know what to focus on, and things becomes apparently, very, very clear what is working and what is not working, and the things that are draining resources. You'll be able to say, oh, no, that's not the type of people we are targeting, and we need to stay the course, so to speak. Let's go back to the hard part.
Oh, that's fine. No, you know what? I'm gonna jump on what you just said. I think one of the things I do very differently than most people is I don't think enough people go in and understand their customer. I use a ton of qualitative research or focus groups. We used to call them advisory panels, and I've moderated them. And the client, I had them sit in the room, and they don't necessarily want to hear some of the things they're hearing, but they need to hear it. So that's very important. So now the hard part is once you've set the objective, I always say that it's the strategy that separates the men from the boys, right?
That's
The
right.
strategy is, all right, now we know what we have to do. We know what the problems are. How are we going to accomplish this thing? And it depends upon so many things. It could be very simple. Okay, we're going to raise the price, increase the price, come out with a program, frequent flyer programs for the airlines back in the day. That's how we're going to get our loyalty. Whatever that issue is, but that's what you need to think through. And frankly, what in my experience is, often you start with an array of different strategies, then go out and test the strategies. And then, after you've said, okay, this seems to be the one that's most appealing to the customer, then you go to the next step, which is, okay, how are we going to get it done? So there's the creative, the tactical things that you need to do, whether what kind of creative is going to be. Are you going to do traditional advertising? Are you going to go digital? Are you going to do guerrilla marketing? It's all those kind of different thoughts. And then as part of the tactics, what are things going to cost? I always view the tactics as things that you can list and things that you can pay for and schedule. Those are the tactical components.
Indeed. I always say strategy beats tactics every single time.
Absolutely.
I've discovered that the business that focus on strategy long-term wise, tends to have the growth, tends to retain people, and also gets to have a bigger profit share than tactics, because tactics comes in and go. But if you've got a good strategy, you bring in the right tactic and develop and evolve with it, it's amazing what can happen. People buy in and you go a long way.
Yes, and I think it really helps an executive, particularly if they're writing and dealing with the team and the agencies I've always worked with. You sit with the team, and if they're going to write something out, you make sure they follow these steps that I'm going through with you. And when they get to the strategies, that's usually the one that's the hardest part for them. Is to sit down and you work them through it. But it's in my second book, I talk more about part of the strategy is what is the vision, but that's really separate after that. But it's really an important component of the strategy.
Absolutely. Bill, I know you're listening to this. If you haven't taken time to go through the few things that we've done, it will pay off. It may be just one day out of your busy 7-day week or 5-day week, whichever you do, but it will pay dividend long-term wise. So I highly encourage you to take time. If you don't know how to do this, engage services like that of Jim or many other people out there, and they will sit down with you and show you what you need to do right now. Let's move forward here, Jim. Once you've got all these things, dialed in, what else do you have to focus on for you to communicate and get real good results?
Well, after you get the tactics, I think people, poor communication is something that is plaguing companies. Recently, in the last few years, there have been some surveys from Inc. magazine that $37 billion was being lost on poor productivity due to poor communication. Grammarly's CEO indicates that poor writing is costing companies $400 billion, and now they're spending $3 billion to try and train that remedial writing. Now, why do I bring that part up? Because if you're not doing these things correctly and you're not getting into communicating it all properly, that things are falling apart. I've often said the greatest strategy in the world, and it is more important, but if you screw up the tactics, that's when you really get in trouble. And I think that's another area where people sometimes take it for granted. How many meetings have all of us been in where you walk into a meeting and there isn't a good agenda, and who's doing, well, I thought you were doing this, and then people aren't coming with the right documentation. The amount of waste in corporate America, and I guess in the corporate world, is crazy in that people aren't really prepared and they don't even know how to prepare. And so to me, those tactics, as much as they're secondary, they can make or break you as well.
That's right. That's why we are talking about this. So you get ready, Bill, and make sure that you get this dialed in. One of the things that I've noticed, I don't know if you have noticed, Jim, as well, that when people want to try and address these key things. They know that it needs addressed, but they end up making mistakes after mistakes. In your opinion, what sort of common mistakes that people who try to do this on their own end up doing, oftentimes end up costing them a lot of money?
Yeah, I think what happens is people sometimes as I said before, they kind of take it for granted and they don't institute, um, procedures. Procter and Gamble, Jack Welch, Procter and Gamble. I didn't work there, but a lot of the people I worked with did. They had rules about, in the days when there were typewriters, they had rules about you could only have one space. You had to get it to one page. If you don't get some of these structures in place, it's great to leave a meeting and say, everybody, okay, now we're going to communicate better. But if you don't have, literally at the end of my book, all you need to do is write down these 10 steps and put it on a piece of paper and make everybody fill in the blanks. Then you're all working off the same page. I just think that there's some basic 101 type procedures that, some of your listeners may be saying, well, that's ridiculous. I know how to do that. But from my perspective, I go into a lot of companies that are in trouble, and when you got all these communication breakdowns, it's because people are taking simple processes. Processes are important, and so that becomes part of it as well. It becomes a process.
Indeed. Absolutely, indeed. Jim, we're coming toward the end of our time together. I'm not so sure if we'll be able to go over all 10 of them, but would you pick maybe two that you think if the listeners would work on these two, in addition to what we've already talked about, they will be way ahead of the game?
Okay, so in addition to what we talked about, I think it's important to understand that the writing part of this is not just something you say, okay, that's fine. Writing is something that you need to make sure that everybody in your team does, because it helps you think. And if you're not, everybody says it's important to read, right? Everybody reads, and we all gain and reflect from reading, but reading is passive. It's where the writing is active. It's where your mind is focusing. And the more you write, and you just can't, you write it once and think it's right. I write every day. I'm always dealing with writing, and I go through and edit myself all day long. If you think you can just bang it out, you're sorely mistaken. There was a great author, David McCullough, and he's written lots of big books. And he was asked one time, how much time do you spend doing the research and how much time do you spend doing the writing? And he said, nobody ever asks me how much time I spent thinking. And and I think that's a big part of it. We just don't, we're not trained to think, and it's really impacting young people and everybody. There's too much time spent on social media being casual. We need to structure ourselves.
Learn to think. I remember when I went on a retreat a while ago, and it was dedicated to thinking your vision out. When I first heard about that, I don't know, just thinking. But once I go there today, we take some time to think aspects of the vision. By the time I came back and communicated to the team, it was something, I truly believe in. And I was prepared to go all out, and we're still doing it. In fact, we have incorporated that in this business show. So again, thinking time is always result time, and it will produce result in the end for you in the long run.
Yes, it's interesting. Really quickly, my second book was an outgrowth. It was the appendix of the first one, and I had all these thoughts that I've learned over these 45 years, and I decided to make it an acronym, and it's called Learn the Adapter Method, and it stands for analyze, deduce, author, perform, tackle, evaluate, and refine. And I give all my tips and tools, so to speak, for how to analyze well and how to deduce things. So I think if you follow these procedures, it'll everybody will be able to benefit from it.
Incredible. While we are talking about your second book, would you share with everybody here where they can find your second book if they would like to know to learn more?
Sure. Both books are available on Amazon in both Kindle, paperback, and now the first one is available also in the audio. And the thing, if you have to look for it and you say get your ducks in a row, you have to remember two things. It's not a regular ROW. My last name is Rowe, ROWE, so you have to put that in there. And secondly, it helps because we're still very new. I only launched it a few months ago. Is to put my name in there, Jim Rowe, then it'll come up. Or you can go to my website, jimrowemarketing.com, and I have information on my agency as well as all my information on the books as well.
Absolutely. And in one of those books, you will learn these 10 steps, 10 ways to structure your communication. We've just touched maybe 4 of those here, but you will get into details when you get that book. Jim, I always want to finish off by talking to you as a business owner. Having been in business for so long, helping other people do
it's amazing
very
I'm
well.
still standing, right?
Yes, it's absolutely outstanding. Tell me, what is it that has kept you going despite all the difficult and ups and downs of business running? What is it that keeps you in the game?
I have a passion for this. I have some friends that are so happy they're retired and they just love every day. And my wife just my father passed away last year at 94. He said he's never going to retire. I just love what I do. And I'm always creating something new. I play guitar. I've written over 100 songs. I've got 2 books that I've written. I like doing this, and it always comes back to some kind of marketing. And it keeps you active, and hopefully it'll keep me young.
We did. Well, it's working. And maybe one final question here. If you were to do this all over again, running business, knowing what you know now, what is required, the efficiency, marketing, writing, and thinking, what would be the one thing that you would have focused on earlier on in your journey?
Well, that's a great question. I would have probably tried to be better at the new business side. I brought in more accounts. Some of them weren't as big. New business is a tough one. And the beauty now, I should have been born later because I'll tell you why. The amount of companies that contact me every single day, several a day, saying I can get you leads. Well, that's only been going on the last 5 years. Yeah, there's been companies that do that, but now the technology is so far advanced. A couple of times somebody's gotten through to me and I've said, where were you 10 years ago when I was still trying to, pay the bills for the full space on Park Avenue in New York? That's something that I think you have to focus on. But from this perspective, I don't know whether I would have done a lot different other than maybe I would have narrowed my focus on just branding. That's interesting, as opposed to handling the agency and 36 people and having all the tactical components, because I got in the office at 7 a.m. and I would leave at 7 to 8 or later at night. It's a lot of work. Indeed,
absolutely. Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your nuggets of wisdom with us. Truly enjoy that. In fact, I do hope that one day you would come back and share with us.
Well, you've been very kind, and you're one of the great successes in the podcast world. So I'm honored to be here. So thank you.
Outstanding. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to know how to better your communication, how to write, to think, and how to communicate your vision with the people that you are leading, or even to sell effectively, you know where to go. Reach out to Jim Rowe and you'll be able to win. I always say success leaves clues, and Jim has the clues. You'll be able to follow those out as well. And with that said, if you want to learn how to podcast, how to start to scale and monetize a podcast, we've got a special program we've put together for you, and you can reach out to our team. And again, leave us a review, go on to Google, find us, and let us know how we are doing so that we can improve. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, live well, live with passion, know that the best is yet to come. Goodbye for now. Thanks again, Jim. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Yukai.
Thank you for listening to Yukai Business Show. We will be back to bring you more episodes with success stories and advice straight from the experts. Want more? Check out www.yukaibusinessshow.com. Get your free trial of our virtual assistant service today. Just visit www.worldoutsourcingsolutions.com. Quote WOS18 or send us an email at support@worldoutsourcingsolutions.com.